Okay, so now we've got our text. What we're going to do is we're going to add 2 buttons. So under your buttons again, you've got some pre-existing elements in here. Not going to go through all of them at the moment, but you've got directional arrows, you've got pulsars, so buttons that pulse, hotspots, and you've got these launch, skip, back, learn more buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with this basic launch button. So I'm going to click it in my media library and I'm going to drag it into my canvas and let go. You should be able to see I've got this launch button. So I'm going to have 2 buttons on my home screen, and again, I'm going to think about where they get positioned. So let's drag another one in, let go, and I'm not going to worry too much about getting them identically lined up at the moment. We're going to do that when we do our responsive settings in a minute. So our first button is going to say, I don't want it to say launch, I want it to say begin. And then our second button is going to open a page of instructions. So I always think when you're making these interactive documentaries, it's really important to have some kind of instruction somewhere. Even if you think your documentary is really simple and it should be easy to understand, just create a little instructions page, instructions, where people can actually read, how you navigate through your documentary, what the different buttons do, are there any areas they should be looking out for to click on. Okay, so there we go, begin and instructions. So again, these don't look bad at the moment, they're lined up kind of okay, could be better. So if I go into File, Run on our sequence, should be able to see our buttons. And now we can see with our buttons, they're floating around not where I put them, and that's because of the responsive settings. When I hover over these buttons, they turn white with black text. So it looks pretty nice, but it doesn't really fit in with the style I'm going for. So I'd like to get this yellow colour in these buttons somewhere. So we're going to go and change the design of these buttons in a minute after we've changed their position. Okay, so I'm just trying to keep the amount of width tabs here I've got open to a minimum. Let's go back to Klynt and let's click on our first button. So in terms of positioning, exactly the same thing we did with the text. So let's go for, this time let's go for proportional size buttons. So these buttons will change in size when our window changes. We'll see how this works. I might go back to fixed size in a minute, but let's try it for now. So proportional size, and currently, because we don't have any of our side locks ticked, what's happening is our elements are being centered. So you can lock things to the center of the screen, which is also really, really handy if you want to have text or elements kind of really central. But again, because we're working in the top left-hand corner of our window, we're going to lock our buttons to the top left-hand corners. And because our text was 40 pixels from the left, let's have this first button 40 pixels from the left. And then to try and keep things nice and uniform, let's just go for 150. You should be able to see it jumps up a little bit. Okay, so I've got proportional size, 150 pixels from the top, 40 pixels from the left. I'm going to select my instructions button, and I'm going to do the same. Proportional size, 150 pixels from the top. But again, I don't want to put 40 pixels from the left because that will put it on top of the begin button. So I'm going to lock it to the left. It's currently 249. Let's see if we can shuffle it a little bit closer. So let's try 240. Okay, a little bit more. Let's try 230. Okay, that looks good. So again, let's just have a look in our browser to see how that works. So run sequence from the start. Again, it doesn't really matter about running it from the start for this particular sequence because the whole sequence is pretty much the same. Nothing happens. So look, that's what's currently happening with our buttons when they're proportional. Okay, so I said let's try proportional, and again with Klynt, a lot of this stuff is trial and error. So it's quite nice that my buttons change size, even though they get too small there, but they move around as well. So I'm not particularly happy with that. They look nice when the window's at that size. So what I'm going to do, go back to Klynt, and we're going to make them fixed size. What will happen when you change to fixed size is you might notice that some of your coordinates change here. So you want to check to make sure you're still happy with them. So again, I'm going to make sure it's 40 pixels from the left, and this time I'm going to line them up to both be 140 pixels from the top. So 140, and let's change that to be 210. Okay, and again, let's just run and see how it looks. So I usually click save before I run. You don't have to. It's just kind of my way to know that I have saved. And now you can see when I move my window around, my buttons are locked in place. So now I've got this nice kind of title screen. Just a few things I need to do now to finish it off. One, I'm going to change the style. Two, I'm going to look at this background image. So as well as being able to change the responsive settings for our elements we've got here, we can also change the responsive settings for our background image. So if I click on it, you can see we've currently got it fit to window. So that means basically when your window changes size, your browser window, parts of that image get cropped off, so it always fills it. And you've got the fill options down here. You've got zoom, letterbox and stretch. So let's just have a quick look at what those three options do. So I'm going to go to stretch. Don't have any other options here to change it, it's just stretch. And again, if I go run sequence. So what happens with my background image now is I always see the whole image, but what happens when my browser window gets thinner, my image gets thinner. What happens when it gets wider, my image gets wider. You can see it's really stretching that image. And it's kind of up to you to make the decision whether you like that or not. I don't think it looks particularly good. I never like to stretch or squash my images. I always like them to be kind of as they were taken. But that's what that stretch option does. And if I change this to letterbox, and again we do a preview. I keep calling it a preview, they call it run in Klynt, but you know, same kind of thing. So now when I look at my image, you should be able to see it has these black bars that appear around it. This is called letterboxing. So if I change my browser window, we get black bars at the top. So our image always stays the same shape, never changes shape. We just get black bars appearing around it, depending on the window size. Again, for video, this might come in handy. For the image, I don't think it works particularly well for our title screen. So we're going to go back to our zoom option. So the final thing I'm going to show you with this background image is with the zoom options, you can decide where the focus is on your image. So you've got zoom into the center, top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. So because the computer is on the right hand side, let's try making our image focus on the bottom right. So now when I go file, run, again I'm getting a lot of tabs open here, so I'm going to close some of them in a minute. So now when I change my window size, you should be able to see when it refocuses and when it crops, kind of focus in the bottom right hand corner, which looks pretty good when the image is wide, but not particularly great when it gets quite narrow. So let's go back and put that back into center. But again, these options might come in handy when you're working with different elements. For us, the default zoom center is fine for this image.